Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Sterling Live. My name is Caitlin Brower. I am Sterling's social media manager, and I am also your host for Sterling Live. And today's episode, of course, I am so excited to have the two guests above me here today. We're going to have an amazing episode. So today I have with me Ken Schnee, General Manager, Technology, Media, Entertainment, and Hospitality, and Taylor Liggett, General Manager of Sterling Identity. As you can see on the bottom, we are talking about the latest in identity hiring tools for the tech industry. Taylor and Ken are no stranger to Sterling Live. I've had the both of them on so many times. Taylor and I were actually talking before the show. He was on one of the first ever episodes about 2 years ago. So I'm so happy to have the two of you back. And I would love for you to introduce yourselves to our audience. So Ken, I'll start with you. Can you go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience today?
Absolutely, Caitlin. And first, let me thank you for inviting me to the show today. Really excited about the discussion. As you mentioned, am the general manager of our tech, media, entertainment, hospitality, and have been at Sterling about 14 years now. And now is more than ever is one of the most innovative times that we've been seeing in the screening industry. And so really excited to talk about identity today. It's been core to our strategy and really excited to talk about the trends that we've been seeing going forward. So thanks again for the invite and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you. Taylor, can you go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience?
Yeah, thanks, Caitlin. Hi, everyone. My name is Taylor Liggett. I oversee identity services at Sterling and haven't been at Sterling for 14 years like Ken, but I've been broadly within this industry for about that amount of time. And I would agree with Ken. This is one of the most exciting times that certainly I've been through relative to innovation and everything that's going on. So excited to get into that today. Caitlin, I very well remember one of these early episodes. It was right in the heat of the pandemic and a lot of fun. So happy to be back. Thanks again for having me.
Yeah, and of course, and things have clearly changed over these past 2 years. And like the two of you said, an exciting time, a lot of things going on. These past couple of episodes of Sterling Live that we've had, we're talking about the latest developments. It really is exciting, like the two of you said. So as we get into the discussion today, I want to remind our audience, if you are watching live on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube, you can ask Ken and Taylor questions. Just go ahead and type your question into the comment box, and I will get them over to the two guests as I see fit throughout the show. So let's go ahead and get into it. So I just want to do a brief overview of identity verification. So Taylor, can you let us know a little bit about it and what kind of industry trends we're seeing here with identity?
Yeah, so look, identity verification at its core, very simple process or very simple concept in that it's making sure that there's a real person that is who they say they are prior to engaging into a certain process, right? So it's making sure that Ken Schnee is Ken Schnee and the information he's presenting about himself is accurate and is who he is. I think what I constantly try to remind everyone of, and that is just something that I think takes people a bit to digest, is that this is not a standard component of a background screen that exists. And I was literally just on with a client, kind of going through everything, and I kind of made this point, walked through everything, and then when we got done, they said, great, how does your standard identity verification work? It's just hard to kind of get out of folks' head that that's not an existing process. So I think we're clearly excited to lead the way on this. It does, by the way, this is different by country. So some countries have kind of more formalized standard identity verification processes. The US is kind of uniquely behind there. So we're seeing a huge trend kind of moving forward to shore up that gap, have employers put identity verification as a first step within the process. Have that sort of lead into the quality that we'd like to see within a background check. And then more broadly, to your question on trends, I think we're seeing a huge movement towards just digital identity and digital identity innovation, right? So we don't live necessarily in the analog world anymore. The days of showing our driver's license are fewer and far between. A lot of what we do is engage in an online environment. But part of the problem is we often go through a bunch of disparate identity verification processes. I mean, we might go through one to open a bank account, another one to rent an Airbnb, and another one to get a different job. So there's a huge amount of innovation in reusable identity that we're really excited about.
Yeah, no, it's a great overview for sure. And really, kind of like paints that picture for our audience. So with the trends, and just identity verification in general, what industries are you really seeing this take off in? The advancements, just, adopting identity in general.
Mm-hmm. Well, look, we're certainly on with technology, and that comes to mind as an immediate place to start. I mean, the tech space in general, obviously innovators, I think in particular gig, has seen a tremendous adoption of identity verification. I would actually credit gig with being one of the sectors that really brought identity verification to the mainstream, so to speak. I mean, they were kind of forced prior to many industries having to deal with remote kind of disparate workforces. Gig was dealing with that right away. I think where there's tremendous opportunity there is by more fully integrating that into the screening and overall processes. But we're seeing it a lot with technology and gig. Financial services is another just place I would mention, just because I think that there's been particular vulnerabilities that have existed there as well that a lot of those companies are starting to wake up to. But candidly, we're seeing this across the board because it's a problem that impacts everyone.
Right. Yeah. And definitely, technology. Great, great segue for today's conversation, of course. So I want to get into a little bit, the tech industry, identity and how it all plays together. So Ken, going back to trends, but more so within tech, what are you seeing today, as leading this industry at Sterling?
Yeah. So, the focus on gig that Taylor hit on there for a moment is really what I'll call the fulcrum of identity within our industry. Now, we can't ignore that COVID happened and it jump-started a lot within the business sector. And one of those things was the contingent workforce that we see. It is estimated that 83% of executives are reporting an increase in contingent labor in order to meet their business objectives. And we surveyed 32% of organizations that are surveyed are saying they're replacing full-time employees with contingent work. And it's estimated that by 2050, over 50% of the workforce will be contingent, likely remote U.S. workforce. So what does all this mean, and why am I talking so much about contingent, and why did Taylor bring it up? It's because when we are working in that type of space, it is very easy for somebody to manipulate their identity, to pretend they're somebody else, to hide behind a computer, to hide behind an email. And it's critical that organizations like Sterling and frankly, the industry as a whole are able to get ahead of the curve and ensure that we are creating a foundation of trust and safety for our clients before they even have to think about how these changes are going to impact their business. Now, in addition to the growth of contingent work, there is also the competition of talent that all organizations are dealing with right now. It is fierce out there, and it's critical that every organization is able to optimize from the beginning to the end. And why wait until you get to an I-9 at the end of a process to figure out who this person is? And I frankly should say, is that even the right process to identify somebody's identity? I think we've found in the past that even after we've done checks identity on individuals of organizations that have gone through the I-9 process, we still find an invalid rate within that population. So times are changing. The economy is changing. The evolution of business is changing. It's important that this, background screening, which is now a long-standing business over 45 years, for it to evolve as well. And this is the future of that evolution.
So go. Absolutely.
I just want to add something real quick, just specific to tech in that discussion. There was something that the FBI put out a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I saw that.
And essentially, it was a warning, like an all points bulletin about an increase that they're tracking in effectively stolen PII identity fraud that's happening, but their specific call out, we're seeing this pretty broadly, but their specific call out was tech, right? Like they were saying specifically, like if we're seeing this in one area, remote gets at exactly what Ken was talking about in these sort of IT software engineering type positions that are occurring. So I just want to call that out. That's another thing that we're seeing that is specific in technology, or at least should be a sort of specific top of mind concern within technology. Because one of the big learnings that we've had has been, going into this, I think there was a common understanding that like a lot of what we would see would be people throwing off information or committing some type of identity fraud for the purposes of getting a job, right? So like I'm gonna evade this criminal background check by doing this. And we see that. But what's been worse is we've been seeing like proper bad actors do this specifically for the purpose of getting access to proprietary information or tech. And they're doing that, I think, in particular in technology-related positions.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're go. Keep going. You keep going.
I mean, just to add on that I think that the compliance piece, the ensuring you have the right person, that is a big part of identity. But we should also think about, and specific to tech, is the innovation that embedding somebody's identity into the workflow brings. We're able to capture all of their PII data ultimately from their identification. It prevents not only errors across the way, but it streamlines. And tech companies are always forward thinking. They want to limit the number of clicks, limit the number of engagements and touch points. And frankly, that's the mission that we're on as well, because it'll drive a far more efficient process.
Absolutely. And two of the things that, you both had mentioned it, over the last minute or so in regards to, being remote and, are the threats coming from being behind that computer screen, this new quote unquote online identity. So I want to dive into that a little bit more. And Taylor, I'll start with you first. Just overall on the increase of, using identity in this remote first world that we're in now.
Yeah. I mean, look, here's what I would say. So to the core question of like, has the move to remote increased identity fraud and sort of, made this issue worse? Like, absolutely, that's a factor. There's no question that when people are behind a screen and not in person and capable of engaging in a digital way, that completely can change behavior and can give more space to stuff like this. But I also want to be clear, like, we're not just seeing it there. I can't tell you guys how many sort of anecdotal data points we get from clients about one person interviewing and then another person physically showing up into an office. So it is also happening in person, but certainly like the focus and the disproportionate kind of impact seems to be occurring within the remote workforce. But I'd say there's another factor that's happened that I also think is important for employers and technology companies to be taken into account just in understanding this. So we've talked about the move to remote, but another big thing that happened around COVID, and of course, one of the accelerators to moving remote was there was tremendous fraud that increased in the wake of COVID. So in particular, access to government benefits, if you think about like unemployment and so on, astronomical fraud, like to the point where, kind of criminal enterprises and got involved in this. And so they've made an investment in, stolen information that's being used and repurposed in all kinds of different ways. So that's another factor to take into account.
Yeah. Ken, do you have anything to add in regard to this increase in identity because of this remote world that we're in?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, and fortunately, tech is the one of the industries where it's very easy to sort of slip between the cracks, because often, especially in consulting work, you're given a project, you take that project. You frankly, you could be anybody, and as long as what's returned is the product, then nobody really notices anything. I think it was just a few weeks ago I read about an individual that was actually employed at 3 different companies at the same time and had signed full employment contracts for each of them under 3 different very similar names and 3 different SSNs. And look, and I'm sure productivity was not really up to snuff in each one of those scenarios, I have to assume. But you don't want to get to that point. You don't want to notice this like 6 months into a big project, and all of a sudden the way you find out is because somebody's not being productive, and then you start digging in. It's critical that this is identified on the front end. And yeah, being remote, it's created like the ability to be a ghost worker. And frankly, identity is the solution to prevent that.
Yeah, so we've talked about a couple. So we talked about remote. We're talking about contingent. We're talking about identity fraud, like certain things that we're seeing out there right now. So Ken, I'll start with you, and I want to transition into Taylor. How is identity verification fitting into all of these trends that we've talked about so far?
Yeah, so I think I ended my last sentence probably where I'll begin this one, in that.
Great transition.
Exactly. Thank you for that, Caitlin. The identity is the solution to the problem that we're faced with today, being the unknowns of hiring due to all of the factors that we talked about, right? You mentioned it's not just remote, it's contingent, it's the competition for talent, it's the fact that recruiters on teams are working very hard, and when they finally get to a candidate, the background check is the last thing that they want to be worrying about. And unfortunately, people do everything they can to push the candidate through. And as an organization, you need to have these safety nets, and identity provides that. It is a core solution that can't be tricked. There are no ways around it. And it's one way to lock in the security of your organization and your hire and your projects and everything you're going to be working from there.
Yeah, it was definitely a good transition, a good easy one in there. Taylor, would love if you have any, additional thoughts on this of, all the trends that we've discussed so far, the actual fitting in of identity verification.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think Ken covered really well the piece that this is sort of the obvious solution to the fraud and issues that we've seen. The other piece I would highlight is that there's a not insignificant benefit to candidate experience that comes with this. Ken alluded to this earlier. If you consider what we've done with ID.me, where ID.me operates as a trusted, reusable digital identity, right? Which I think is really the future. There's 90 million plus people now that are part of that network, and so what we're seeing on average is around 30% plus of all candidates coming in is pre-verified. Right. And so that means they just simply log in, they share their information, they're off to the races. It's an amazing experience for those candidates. And even the other ones who are not come in and they get this kind of tangible benefit by going through this process of a reusable digital identity that can be used with government, retail, and organizations sort of more broadly. So I think that's the other way it's kind of fitting in here. It's not just in reducing fraud and associated incidents. It's also helping just streamline and modernize this overall process.
Yeah, and I'm really happy that keep going. You go.
I was just gonna thanks. I was just gonna add to that. One thing that's pretty interesting here is most organizations believe that with their background check today that they are doing an identity verification. There's something called a social security trace, which pulls up a bunch of matching data on your candidate. Yeah, the unfortunate truth is that is not an identity verification. That is a tips and leads to get boundaries on which to search for a candidate, but it is not verifying that the SSN belongs to that individual. It is not verifying their address. And so I think, obviously we cannot see the audience today, but I think we probably would have a few shocked faces, and they're like, wait, what do you mean there isn't, right? This is basically delivering what everybody thought they were getting all along. And frankly, I think it's critical, right? When I started in this industry, I also was confused by the SSN trace. I thought that it was doing more than it is. And now that we're moving towards this place where we can be innovative and we can deliver this, I think it's something that it will just become a norm within the industry as part of a background check.
Yeah, and I would just add to that because I think it's such an important point. We've quantified this somewhat, right? Like we've done a number of kind of webinars and surveys and associated type things where we've found roughly 2/3 of all employers mistakenly believe this is happening. And by the way, like a lot of the industry, unfortunately, is not helping this. There has been a conflation of SSN trace and related tools with identity. I think being generous, most screening companies tried to do the best they could before new solutions existed, but solutions exist now, and I think it's important that we're really help employers understand that this is not happening. It is a vulnerability, and it's something we need to fix.
Absolutely. We have a ton, like you had said, Taylor, and please excuse me, I have landscapers outside. So if anyone can hear that background noise, they told me they wanted to watch Sterling Live. So that's why they're here. So please ignore that background noise. But
The suburban life. I just moved to the suburbs. I get it. You can't stop the lawnmowers.
They know once a week to come back to watch Sterling Live.
Yeah.
But Taylor, you brought up, a ton of research that we've done, and absolutely, our staffing vertical just released something with SIA in regards to identity. And then Sterling, just from a corporate perspective, we just released an entire industry report called Hiring Reimagined. And we do touch on that aspect of identity verification, asking organizations, do you know if you actually run this? Are you comfortable with your identity verification processes? So definitely check out all the research that Sterling has, because it really is eye-opening. And Ken, maybe you'll get those kind of like shocked faces from people out there. So you can't see them, but maybe they are doing it like you had said. Taylor, a little bit ago, you talked about candidates and the side of, being a candidate going through this identity process. So what does identity verification look like from a candidate's perspective? Can you go into that a little bit more?
For sure. So, what a candidate's going to come in to do. So I think, look, it's identity verification is one thing. I think what we're doing with ID.me and reusable identity is another thing. So I'll kind of answer it through that lens. Typically the actual identity verification process is going to consist of an individual going through and either using a mobile phone as a means of verification or using government issued IDs. Potentially in some processes, you take a photo of yourself. That's used to actually match to other documentation. Sometimes you can have biographic data, social security number, et cetera, used in this verification process. But typically the individual is going to go through a few steps that verify they are who they say they are and use supporting documentation or devices to help attest to that. From this perspective, what we're doing with ID.me is asking people to just do that once. And it doesn't have to be with Sterling. It can be with, the IRS or California State or any of the other numerous places that use ID.me. And so when a candidate comes in, there's this awesome opportunity to say, oh, hey, yeah, I've gone through that. Cool. And then I log in and I share my information. The other thing that's important to point out is that it is entirely privacy centric and sort of at the control of the individual. So we believe there's a huge benefit in people owning their own digital identity and having that be federated. But if someone goes through this and they're like, you know what, I don't want that, or I don't trust this company, or whatever the case may be, they can also remove all their information, or they can restrict it. They're in complete control over their information. And it's also a consent-based process. So even as you go through identity verification, you're giving specific consent to, I'm going to share my name, date of birth, social, et cetera, with Sterling for the purposes of this background check. So from a consumer's perspective, a lot of the feedback we've gotten is that, it's an easy process to go through. It takes a couple minutes, and there's broad value, and they appreciate how sort of focused on privacy and security we are as well.
Yeah, I think those are definitely the areas, as a consumer, for anything that you are consuming, you want to make sure it's fast, it's convenient. And then also too, many of us are concerned about that privacy aspect. So, very happy to hear that Sterling is delivering on all of those aspects for sure. Ken, so I've got a big question for you here. So the rise of identity verification, what is your opinion on this impact that this will have on tech companies moving forward?
So the one thing that is core to the majority of tech organizations is the candidate experience. The onboarding experience of a new hire is critical because, like we do at Sterling, they believe that it is the first impression that a new hire has of the organization. And so what they experience from the moment that a tech org decides to hire them until they're physically sitting in their seat is critical. And as we've been mentioning here, identity is on the rise. So putting those two pieces together, what is critical to tech companies with the rise of identity in remote work and contingent work is that it is seamless. And like we have developed other platform products on our system, like Candidate Hub and Client Hub, we call those mobile first because they were designed to for the experience to be built around the user that's actually experiencing them. And I would say the same for our identity solution. Taylor was definitely put through the ringer on developing a workflow and a solution that is seamless. And frankly, we couldn't have it any other way. There can't be additional steps. There can't be additional caveats within the workflow. It needs to operate seamlessly so that physically we're flipping a switch, we're turning on identity, but it is not changing the turnaround time, the accuracy, or the experience of the candidate. As a matter of fact, in this case, as I mentioned earlier, it's making it more seamless and easier for the candidate. So by marrying all those pieces together, we're not just building a product for background screening, we're building a product for the tech industry end to end.
That's great. So let's go ahead and move into the future, because it would not be an episode of Sterling Live if I did not ask my guests about what's to come, what's the future look like. So Taylor, I will start with you here. Let's talk about the future of identity. I know you brought up digital before, maybe talking about the digital wallet. What do you see as future possibilities with this technology?
Yeah, look, I think I think there's a couple things. I mean, in the immediate future, I think Ken said it earlier, we're focused on this becoming essentially just a foundational component of background screen. Our view is that every background screen should start with this and inform the rest of the downstream processes. So I believe that will start to happen. The broader rise of digital identity is a really important trend to take into account. And, the US is arguably not as far ahead as some of the countries, but for example, the EU is scheduled to sort of complete the technical framework for a government focused sort of digital wallet that all sort of individuals in the EU would have access to. And I think we'll see a lot more of that. So digital wallet and reusable digital identity is what I would couch as the future, where things are rapidly heading and where Sterling has really centered all of our solutions around. So what that means for technology companies and otherwise is that we'll have platforms where an individual can have a trusted, verified identity that they can use in multiple different ways with multiple different kind of relying parties and partners, similar to how IDME operates today. But beyond that, can also store verified attributes about themselves, right? So if we think about kind of the obvious cases, like why do you need to constantly re-verify your educational degree or your work history or other sort of immutable data, right? It's just because better solutions don't exist. We're clearly focused on taking that, having that be tied to an individual under individual's control and moving with them. So if you can consider the concept of having pre-verified candidates at some point, right? And for an individual, being able to go into a hiring process with verified data about yourself and show that makes you even more of attractive of a candidate. And even just beyond employment, there are countless use cases where this will come into play. So I think broadly speaking, digital wallet, verified attributes, reusable digital identity is really the future and something that I'm particularly excited about.
Ken, what do you see as the future possibilities with this technology?
Yeah, so I agree with everything that Taylor said. And one thing I would add is that I believe that identity will be core to every person that is brought onto an organization because of the value that it brings. And Taylor went into a little bit about the verified credentials. I think that it even goes beyond that. I think that we're going to start to see data stored about individuals that is very hard to verify today, like being Scrum certified or having C++ coding experience or Java. These are certifications that really you can get from multitudes of places, and it's very hard for organizations to narrow those down. Maybe they're doing some kind of testing today, but with this verified credential, the future is really limitless in the profile that we're able to designate to somebody. And I think that just makes a background check that much stronger, not just for trust and safety, but also for quality and performance as we look towards the future.
A lot of exciting things happening right now with identity, but it looks like things are getting a little bit more exciting as we advance towards the future. So great to hear, both of those things from you too. At this time, I want to, ask our audience, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, if you are watching live, if you have any final questions for Ken and Taylor, please go ahead and submit them now. As we wait for any final questions to come through, I want to get final thoughts from the two of you. So Ken, I'll hand it over for you first. Final thoughts for our audience today.
I would just say that, this is sort of a train that everybody should at least get a ticket to take a ride and check it out, see what it does for their organization. You're hearing a lot about the innovation, and obviously the first one to get there is usually the early bird that gets the worm. So I'd be happy to further any discussions if anybody's interested in learning more about identity and what it could bring to your organization.
For sure. We do actually have a question in real quick. It's Ken for you, so I'll stay with you real quick. Sure. The individual just wants to get clarification. Did you say that you are seeing that by 2050, over 50% of the workforce in the U.S. will be remote and contingent versus full-time?
Yes, absolutely. That is the statistic. We can follow up with where the source was on that, yeah. But by 2050, the workforce will be 50% contingent based. Mm-hmm. I'll also place a bet on that. If whoever has the question, I'll bet against it.
Well, I have to put a disclaimer. This is not a sports book, Sterling Live, so we can't place live bets right now. Just a little disclaimer for everyone. And also, too, we do talk a lot about remote work, contingent work versus full-time. Again, I'm doing a shameless plug for Hiring Reimagine, our brand new research report. So please check that out. But Ken will go over and get that stat over to everyone watching today. So thank you. Great question. Good clarification and follow-up there. Taylor, final thoughts from you for our audience today.
Yeah, look, thanks again for having us. I mean, I think this is a good discussion, got most of the key stuff on the table. I guess what I would say is this integration of identity into the hiring process is a no-brainer. If we would have looked at constructing the background screening industry today and all these processes, it would of course start with identity verification. But I think the fact that that was not the case, that we're playing catch up, that's made this relatively new. There's a lot of adjustment with employers sort of understanding what is and isn't happening. But my number one recommendation is don't wait till you're bid on this. Unfortunately, a lot of the companies that were first in line to adopt this solution had an identity fraud related problem blow up on them. And, it's arguably worse, these instances, than what we've seen sort of traditionally with letting someone in with a criminal history or what have you, not to downplay the seriousness of that. But, these are oftentimes people who are very nefarious and kind of coming in to hide their identity on purpose and do some things. So we've seen really disastrous occurrences. And I would just encourage everyone to look at this seriously. See how it can integrate into your process, and then also to help contribute to thoughts like what Ken had. I mean, the skills verification component and how that plays in a digital wallet is an incredibly exciting sort of innovation opportunity that we have. And we love to have customers and prospects feedback on ways they can look at this and say, hey, that's cool what you're doing with identity. It'd be cool if you did this. Or I love the concept of digital wallet. What if you could do this for us? We'd love to have that feedback as we're really just at the beginning stages of building this all out.
Thank you for that. And thank you to the both of you for joining me today on Sterling Live. What an incredible episode. I'm always excited to talk about identity. I'm always excited to sit down with you, Ken, and talk about everything that you have under your vertical. There's a lot of exciting things going on, as everyone knows from the episode that you just watched. So thank you both for joining me. And thank you to everyone, as always, for joining us on Sterling Live. Oh, we have one more question. Sorry. For Taylor, real quick, just to wrap us up here. On digital wallet identification, would that be something that would be backed by Sterling, or are you saying it in general?
So I'm saying I both, I guess. I mean, Sterling is very much leaning into a focused digital wallet offering, right? So this is taking Sterling verified information and turning it into credentials that live within a digital wallet that can move with an individual. So it's very much a focus of what we're doing. But this is also broadly a trend that everyone will see moving more and more out there is the sense of us operating with digital wallets.
Got it. All right. Well, thank you for that. And I psyched everyone out, but now it is the end of the show. And I want to thank you both for joining me today. And thank you to our audience. It was a phenomenal episode of Sterling Live. Thank you both so much.
Thanks, Caitlin. Thanks, Ken.
Thank you.
Of course.
Wow.